Good evening. Welcome to the school board meeting for Columbia Heights Public Schools, Independent School District 13 for Tuesday, January 30th, 2018. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome again. We will start with Holly, our new official roll caller,
Okay.
if you would.
Mueller.
Here.
Severson. Here. Larkin.
Here.
Palmer.
Here.
A Samurai. Here. And Superintendent.
Thank you. Our mission statement, Columbia Heights Public Schools creates worlds of opportunity for every learner in partnership with supportive small-town communities by challenging all to discover their talents, unleash their potential, and develop tools for lifelong success. Our core values are community, excellence, collaboration, integrity, respect, courage, and innovation. First up would be the approval of the agenda. We're looking to move that forward.
So moved.
Lorien,
Second.
Naty, any discussion? Excuse me. Hearing none, all's in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion carries. Announcements. February 6th is a Tuesday. It'd be a precinct caucus day. February 9th, Friday, no school, district in-service day. February 13th at 5 p.m. there'll be a subcommittee on policy. Also on the 13th at 7 p.m. will be a regular school board meeting. February 19th, Monday, no school, President's Day. February 20th at 5 p.m. there'll be a school board listening session. And then February 20th at 5:30, there's a work session, school board work session. And February 27th, there will be at 7 p.m., there'll be a regular school board meeting here in the community room. Next up would be correspondence. Superintendent Kelly, is there any correspondence this evening?
Mr. Chair and members, there's no.
Okay.
It's not working.
Is her mic working? It is, you can get it? Okay.
Okay, got it.
Thank you. All right. Next up would be communication to the board. At this point, citizen and employee representatives. Any citizen or employee may briefly address the school board. The board will listen to brief remarks, ask clarifying questions, and if desired, request that the administration follow up. The board will not take action at this meeting on requests presented at this time. So, Nick. The consent agenda, which includes the personnel report. Looking for a motion to move that forward.
So moved.
Lorien?
Second.
Laura? Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. Next up would be an acknowledgement of contributions, which is a resolution. So I will ask for a motion in a second, then I'll read it, and we can have discussion if we could.
So moved.
Paula?
Second.
Lorien, thank you. Whereas Minnesota Statute 123B.02 permits school boards to receive for the benefits of the district, bequests, donations, or gifts for any proper purpose and apply the same to the purpose designated. In that behalf, the board may act as trustee of any trust created for the benefit of the district and for the benefit of pupils thereof. Therefore, be it resolved by the School Board of Columbia Heights Public Schools, Independent School District Number 13, that the school board accepts with appreciation the contributions detailed in the background in the amount of $2,105.03. And under the detailed background is a donation of $1,123.35 was made to Highland Elementary by Donors Choose for flexible seating for kindergarten language learners for Miss Olson's class. A donation of $89.98 was made to Highland Elementary by Donors Choose for Reading is Fun Leapfrog, Leap Reader System, Learn to Read for Miss Lunder's class. A donation of $72.88 was made by Highland Elementary by Donors Choose for classroom supplies for Miss Zappa's class. Donation of $165 each was made to Valley View Elementary by Life Touch for Students. The following donations were made to the Columbia Heights High School Scholarship Program. LP Restad, $40, Pam Sigurdson, $50, and the following donation was made to the Columbia Heights Eat Up the Debt campaign, Kathy Kelly, $200. Value in kind, donations of school supplies to Valley View by Mark Emmy for student needs, estimated value $26. Donation of coat to Valley View Elementary by Catherine Hale for student needs, estimated value of $106.82. Donation of hat and mittens to Valley View Elementary by Bridget Drews for student needs, estimated value of $56. Donation of hats and mittens to Valley View Elementary by Kathy Lansky for student needs, estimated value of $15. Donation of winter outerwear to Columbia Academy by Wayne and Sandy Root for student needs, estimated value of $100. Donation of winter outerwear to Columbia Academy by Bobby George for student needs, estimated value of $150. Total fiscal year 2017-2018 monetary contributions to date is $11,215.45. Any discussion, questions, or comments?
Thank you very much.
Yes,
It's much
thanks.
appreciated.
Excuse me, if there's no other discussion, Hall, if you would, it's a resolution, so we need a roll call vote.
Severson,
Aye.
Mueller,
Aye.
Palmer,
Aye.
Samurai, aye. Larkin,
Aye. Motion carries. Yes, thank you. Next up would be discussion reports and information. I didn't start with reports from members of the board. Board members will report on board activities since the last regularly scheduled meeting. In the interest of time, I will defer my report this evening. Laura, we'll start with you.
Actually, I really don't have much to report, so I will defer as well.
Paula?
same. I don't have a lot to report, so I will defer.
Okay, thank you. Lorien?
Yeah, I'll just mention a couple things. It's been actually a busy couple of weeks. I attended the TIES meeting last week and the Columbia Academy Principals Roundtable. Also had several conversations with community members and conversation with Kathy Kelly.
Okay. Naty?
Yeah, briefly, I've been to a bunch of activities, band concerts, sporting events. Was up at the high school conferences and attended the college and schools meeting with the AP schools, and I think it's just worth noting that the media center was packed, which was very, very encouraging, just to see so many families, parents, guardians there with their kids excited about college and schools. Definitely worth noting. So it's a highlight, I think.
Okay. Anything else? I will throw one shout out to the students for the one-act play this weekend. They did a phenomenal job with that. And a community event that took place this weekend was the Fire and Ice Plunge. And there was lots of people. I think lots of money was raised. I haven't heard the details. And there was lots of cold water, so there was no shortage of that for anyone. So it was fun. It was a good day. So, next up, superintendent's report.
Superintendent does not have a report tonight.
Okay, thank you. All right, next up, on the information items is discontinuance of programs and position, a resolution that'll be coming forward at a future meeting.
Chair Larkin, members of the board, Superintendent Kelly, this is an annual resolution we bring forward that starts the staffing process. It directs administration and the superintendent to start looking for efficiencies to help balance the budget. So tonight we're just here letting you know about the resolution. It'll be brought forward on the 13th for approval. So is there any questions?
Okay, you got questions?
Nothing's changed since previous years.
No, a little bit of the language just at the top, which talks about the cross subsidy for special education. Those numbers, of course, changed.
Okay.
Anyone else? It's an annual event.
Yes,
Okay, thanks, Lindsay.
thank you.
Next up would be our action items. First one is the state resolution to fully fund special education services.
Chair Larkin, Superintendent Kelly, and members of the board. The first resolution is for the state resolution to fully fund special education services. This resolution was brought to the board last meeting as an informational item, and this evening we're asking you to pass it as an action item. And basically, it's just urging the state of Minnesota to fulfill their mandated obligation to fund special education in our schools.
And they're asking this of all the districts, correct?
Right, MSBA is asking every school district to pass this both on the state level and to, for the federal government also.
Okay. We'll start with a motion and a second, read it, and then open it for
I'll move that
discussion.
forward.
Laura?
Second.
Natty? All right. I didn't write this, so I apologize in advance for the length of it, but whereas local boards of education place a very high priority on ensuring that all students receive high-quality special education programs and instruction, and whereas in 1975, Congress enacted the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, now known as the Individuals with Disability Act, idea to improve access to education for children with disabilities by guaranteeing a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, assure that the rights of children with disabilities and their parents are protected, assist states and school systems to provide for the education of all children with disabilities, and to assess and assure the effectiveness of effort to educate all children with disabilities. And whereas IDEA became law in 1975, the federal government promised to fund 40% of the additional cost of educating children with disabilities, and yet the federal government has failed to adequately fund the mandated programs and services arising under IDEA, never providing more than 15% of the additional cost. Whereas sufficient federal funding for IDEA would significantly enhance the ability of local school systems to provide an excellent education for all students, and whereas the special education cross-subsidy continues to be a major obstacle for Minnesota schools districts to grapple with. Due to the growing number of students receiving special education, more specialized services, and rising costs associated with those services and inadequate funding, and whereas the state special education funding system has not kept pace with the rising cost of mandated services and supports for students with special needs. And whereas the cross-subsidy for school districts for the school year 2016 is $679 million, a 5.6% increase from 2015. Whereas between rising need and insufficient state and federal aid, the amount of funding school districts as a whole in Minnesota will be forced to pay for special education costs will reach an average of $815 per student in the year of 2017. Now therefore be it resolved that we urge the governor and legislature to strenuously advocate for significant increases in federal special education funding and meaningful special education reforms at the federal and state levels. Now therefore be it resolved that there is an urgency the Minnesota legislature to convene a task force to work on special education funding, specifically with a focus on the impacts of the new special education funding formulas, the projected cross-subsidy, and recommendations with a timeline to eliminate the cross-subsidy. Okay. Questions, comments, or discussion?
I have one comment just on the last paragraph, now therefore be it resolved. I think you even stumbled upon, I think that there's a word missing, that there is an urgency, the Minnesota legislator to convene a task force. I
Must
think
be-
that there is an urgency for the Minnesota legislator to
Or
convene.
that? The-
Right, something,
Okay. Maybe highlight that with them. Okay. Any other questions or comments?
Just one more clarifying question. What is our current cross-subsidy for this year, in a year that you can calculate?
The
This year.
Minnesota Department of Education last calculated it in fiscal year 16, and it was $5.3 million for the Columbia Heights School
The
District.
Columbia Heights School District
That's correct.
specifically. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Hearing none, this is a resolution, so roll call vote, please, Hala.
Mueller,
aye.
Severson,
Aye.
Larkin,
Aye.
Samurai, aye. Palmer.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next up would be the federal resolution.
Chair Larkin, Superintendent Kelly, and members of the board. Again, this is the same type of resolution, same intent. MSBA is asking every school district in Minnesota to pass this resolution and forward it to representatives from the federal government, urging full funding of special education mandates.
Okay. Motion to move that forward.
So moved.
Laura?
Second,
Lorien? Okay, whereas local boards of education place a very high priority on ensuring that all students receive high-quality special education programs and instruction. Whereas in 1975, Congress enacted the Education for All Handicapped Children Act, now known as the Individuals with Disabilities Act, otherwise IDEA, to improve access to education for children with disabilities by guaranteeing a free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment, assure that the rights of children with disabilities and their parents are protected, assist states and school systems to provide for the education of all children with disabilities, and to assess and assure the effectiveness of efforts to educate all children with disabilities. Whereas when IDEA became law in 1975, the federal government promised to fund 40% of the additional costs of educating children with disabilities, and yet the federal government has failed to adequately fund the mandated programs and services arising under IDEA, never providing more than 15% of the additional costs. And whereas sufficient federal funding for IDEA would significantly enhance the ability of local school systems to provide an excellent education for all students, and whereas the special education cross-subsidy continues to be a major obstacle for Minnesota school districts to grapple with due to the growing number of students receiving special education, more specialized services and rising costs associated with those services and inadequate funding. And whereas the state special education funding system has not kept pace with the rising cost of mandated services and supports for students with special needs. And whereas the cross-subsidy for Minnesota school districts for the year 2016 is $679 million, a 5.6% increase from 2015. Whereas between rising need and insufficient state and federal aid, the amount of funding school districts as a whole in Minnesota will be forced to pay for special education costs will reach an average of $815 per student in the year 2017. Now therefore be it resolved that we urge the President and Legislature to strenuously advocate for significant increases in federal special education funding and meaningful special education reforms at the federal and state levels. Now therefore be resolved that the state of Minnesota calls upon Congress of the United States to pass appropriate legislation in order to increase funding for federal special education mandates and to meet the urgent financial special education needs of our cities and towns. And be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Senate cause a copy of this resolution to be delivered to all United States representatives and senators representing Minnesota in the Congress of the United States. Discussion or comments or questions?
At last meeting, we talked about possibilities for people who might be watching this to kind of engage in this process. And you mentioned, what was that, 5.2 million was our special ed?
5.3.
5.3, and then what was our budget overall?
The overall budget's about $53 million for
So
the district.
We're
So it's
talking
close to 10%.
10% of our budget going to cover the special education cross-subsidy.
Correct.
So how could an individual citizen in our school district get involved in this process or advocate for do we have any ideas or?
Mr. Chair and Vice Chair, I believe that our Director of Communications is going to be working on that.
Okay.
If the board decides to pass this
Okay.
resolution, then he'll be putting some things, strategies together, getting it up on the
All
website.
right,
and stuff.
thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, hearing no further discussion, roll call please. Holla.
Mueller,
Aye.
Severson,
Aye.
Larkin,
Aye.
Samurai, aye. Palmer,
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. And last action item, high school water piping replacement bids.
Chair Larkin, Superintendent Kelly, and members of the board. This was brought to the board at the last meeting as an informational item, and this is to award the final phase of the project to replace the cold water piping in the high school. The project was started last summer, and this will complete it in the summer of 2018. The recommendation is to award the bid to Horwitz Mechanical, who was the low bidder on the project when it was bid. This is a governance question per Minnesota Statute 471.345, Uniform Municipal Contracting Law, and is at the amount that it has to be board approved before it can proceed forward.
Okay, we'll start with a motion to move that forward.
So moved.
Laura?
Second.
Holla. Discussion.
A couple items. I just wanted to thank Director Carr for talking getting me some additional information regarding the bid. So knowing that, just kind of some of the things that we covered, that we do have to look at the lowest responsible bidder, and that Horwitz is a responsible bid, and it was reviewed that the contract would be in place. You know, one of the concerns that I had expressed previously was that with the low bid, if there would be multiple change orders or different things that would come up that would increase the cost, and it appears that that is covered. I also took some time to research the contractor, and they have a very strong reputation within the industry. So I think that it would be valuable to move that forward.
Yes, in addition to that, and Member Mueller, when she, and you know this, but for the audiences, it's a significant difference between the other bids. So
right.
to ask, are we still going to get what we're supposed to get, I think was appropriate and a good question, and I concur with her. Thank you for taking the time to put that information together, so we know that we will be fine there, but also reinforcing the lowest responsible bidder for us as well, so thanks for that.
And when we do these kinds of contracts, that's part of the engineering company or Kraus Anderson, whoever we're having work with us, that's part of what they do too as a service, is they also investigate and have that conversation to make sure that the contractor hasn't missed things in the bid and that it's an appropriate price, especially when it's such a difference in the bid tab.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Thanks, Lorien, for asking those questions.
No further discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Next up is board topics. Anybody have anything for board topics?
I was just going to throw in a shout out for I saw a lot of Highlander students jumping into the water at the Fire and Ice Plunge, and it was fun to see them repping in their Highlander gear, jumping in, and for various organizations around the city and on behalf of SECA. So congrats to all of them and you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I reach out and kindly thank the Lions for, they were, and I'm assuming it's because people like me so much, but they were raising money and they had to reach a certain amount before I would jump, and they reached it and exceeded it. And again, the Lions played a significant
We
role
had
in
two
that.
no-show jumpers.
Yeah.
We were happy to put it forward.
Yeah,
to a good
you,
cause.
almost a little too happy, Nick, but happy nonetheless.
I was
So,
happy.
I jumped early, that's why.
Yeah.
I went early too, in full catcher's gear, might I add.
I noticed
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
yeah. Okay. Oh, well, again, it was a good day. And yeah, there was a lot of kids from a lot of different organizations that were jumping, so that's nice to see that the kids are getting out there and doing that, so. Okay. Any other board topics? Okay. Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned at 5:55.